The UFC president's new Power Slap League debuted on the 18th of January 2023 and resulted in widespread outrage. There are many reasons why the Slap League is an abomination. It's a spectacle, not a sport. Reportedly, the event garnered just under 300,000 viewers. This isn't that much compared to AEW Dynamite, the pro wrestling show, which had about 1 million people watching. But for those who did tune in, they mostly watched in silent horror. They saw Chris Kennedy's hands and legs curl up as he got brutally knocked out at Dana White's Power Slap League road to the title.
That's rule 1, 2.
Former football player and wrestler Chris Nowinski described Kennedy's hands curling up as a fencing pose, which is something that indicates serious injury to the brain. And why should you listen to a former football player and wrestler? Because Chris Nowinski is a brain trauma researcher now, so he knows what he's talking about. Here's what happened. Early on in the first episode of the Power Slap League, Chris Kennedy was up against Chris Thomas. I know that's a lot of Chris's mentioned already, but just bear with me. Thomas and Kennedy stood facing each other with a podium between them. Thomas lined his hand up and pumped thrice before slapping Kennedy with all of his might, making him fall to the mat. The doctors had to rush in to help him. Chris Kennedy was out cold, and there were 8 horrifying seconds of complete silence before the referee announced that the match was over, and the Chris that won the match started to run around and mock the Chris that lost, followed by 5 slow-motion replays of the slap. Kennedy is shown finally waking up, but when asked by the doctors, he didn't remember what had happened. Kennedy actually thought he was fighting, and the doctors had to tell him that he just got his lights slapped out by another Chris.
So you got knocked out, okay?
Knocked out doing what? Like fighting?
You're in the slap of it.
This, quote, new sport is structured more like a competitive reality TV show than anything else. All the competitors in Dana White's Power Slap League are made to live together, where they all loudly argue with each other and make more content for viewers to watch.
The next episode of Power Slap, Road to the Title.
We don't play talk like that because we're going to bang.
With the pressure mounting, tensions turn to full-blown mayhem at the house.
Other than that, the logos of numerous beverage companies that have partnered with the UFC are displayed everywhere, and sooner or later, all the competitors are given the chance to hurt each other badly. This doesn't really sound like much of a sport at all, honestly. But regardless, the UFC president's Slap League is set for a total of 8 episodes, after which it'll be followed up by a pay-per-view card, though things didn't start off too well for the league. And I'm not just talking about the Chris versus Chris slap-off. Even before the fencing posture incident, the first episode of the Power Slap League had to be postponed by a whole week, and this delay was purposefully carried out in the hopes that people all over the world would forget one thing. Dana White slapped his wife, only he didn't just slap her. Dana also pushed his wife on New Year's Eve in a nightclub in Cabo San Lucas. A video shows Dana and Anna White having an argument at the nightclub, and after a little arguing, Ann put her head in her hands. Clearly, she was very stressed about something, but when Dana grabbed her hand, she slapped the UFC president, who then proceeded to slap his wife twice before pushing her and then turning his back towards the camera. Both Ann and Dana spoke to TMZ later, talking about how long they've been married and also about all the alcohol that the two consume. Ann released a statement, but her husband opted to conduct an on-camera interview where he actually owned up to his actions. The UFC president talked about how there's no excuse for a man to hit a woman. Dana labeled this situation as horrible and talked about how embarrassed he is.
You know, this is one of those situations that's, horrible. I'm embarrassed, but it's also one of those situations that is, right now.
White may have owned up to it, but it's hard to see people forgetting about it, with his own Power Slap League serving as a constant reminder. In his talk with TMZ, White talked about how he deals with his stuff. The UFC has strict standards for dealing with spousal abuse. Dana talked about these standards after he was asked about Ray Price, the NFL player who, in an elevator, punched his fiancée. White said that this is something you never bounce back from, and he spoke about how this has been the standard in the UFC from the moment it started. And it's true that the promotion did release Luis Pena after the fighter was accused of hitting 2 women in a domestic dispute.
Former The Ultimate Fighter Season 27 champion Luis Pena is in hot water again after being arrested for the 3rd time this year. The lightweight contender has had a rough 2021, and his career seems to be going off the rails.
Though when Dana was asked about how the UFC shows leniency towards its star fighters, White said that this could happen to anyone. Clearly, this standard that he talks about doesn't apply to the prominent figures in the UFC. Just look at Conor McGregor, one of the biggest biggest stars in the promotion. The Irish fighter's been accused of 2 different cases of in 2018 and 2019 in Ireland.
Less than a day after McGregor announced he's retiring from mixed martial arts comes a bombshell report that he's being investigated for stemming from an alleged incident last December.
But still, McGregor's fought 3 matches ever since the allegations. The same goes for Mike Perry. His ex-wife accused him of domestic abuse in 2020. Yet just like Conor, Perry was given 2 more fights. And one of those 2 fights was on a pay-per-view card.
In favor of your winner by unanimous decision, Platinum Mike Perry!
The UFC even attempted a redemption arc for Greg Hardy, the former NFL player. They kept trying to give him easy fights, but he kept getting knocked out still. And after getting knocked out a 3rd time, Hardy walked away. It's no surprise, after all this, that Dana would start his Russian and Polish slap fighting inspired league. The Kennedy versus Thomas match showed how horrifying it could be, and this next fighter agrees. Jules Scott says that he might die during White's new contest. The 38-year-old has competed in professional MMA and boxing, and now is taking a slap at the UFC president's new and controversial slap fighting league.
3. You got time? You got time? You got time here, sir? You got time? 20 seconds.
The American fighter disagrees with the general consensus on the competition's safety. Scott thinks that slap fighting is just as dangerous as any of the combat sports he's been a part of previously. In a talk with Complex, Scott said that he's going into slap fighting thinking that he could end up getting killed in this competition. The former MMA artist and boxer talked about how he's willing to do anything to not just survive, but thrive in Dana White's Power Slap League.
It's not a game. I'm not trying something out. This is my game. This was made for me. My body type, my training regimen, my style.
Jules said that this is how he makes money, with combat. He doesn't care about what the rules are. Just tell them to him and he'll play. Only someone with that mentality can compete in this league. The contest is very dangerous. Several contestants in the Slap League have been knocked out brutally. Remember when I talked about Chris Kennedy not remembering what had happened after he got knocked out? Yeah, brain doctor Nowinski says that Kennedy may never be the same again. Ryan Garcia, the boxer, recently called the new sport a horrible idea, and he says that it should be banned because of how dangerous it is. But Jules Scott, in an attempt to defend slap fighting, talked about how MMA fighters and boxers take hits to the head. He says that he's been studying this game for a year now, and he says that nothing dangerous about it has been proven until now. Scott claims that boxing and MMA are more dangerous, and he estimated that every boxer gets hit in the head between 600 and 800 times. I don't know how Scott can say that slap fighting is safe when he also says that he could get killed here. But the point is that while there may be some people defending Dana White's Power Slap, this new sport is in fact very dangerous.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. The power is